Welcome to today's Zoom call on the Appraisal Contingency Addendum to the Agreement of Sale. So there's been a lot of confusion, and I've heard it from agents in our office about the different options and what it means and when to use the form, how to use the form and stuff like that. So I figured it's a good time to go over this form in its entirety and break it down so that we have a better understanding of the form. So right at the top, and you can see it in my notes I wrote down here, this form is not to be used for FHA or VA financing, okay? Why not? Well, because the agreement of sale has that contingency covered already. If you go back to video number 2, when we went over the agreement of sale, we went over that section that the FHA VA clause within the contract already states that if the house doesn't appraise, the buyer doesn't have to move on with the purchase, okay? So you have the property, the seller, and the buyer. Please fill out that properly. I know that's like the most simple thing on this form, but again, you want to fill everything out accurately as possible so that if there was ever an issue that arises, that first portion isn't ever an issue. Oh, you had the wrong address down or whatever. So just make sure that gets filled out properly. So we go to paragraph number 1. Now, paragraph number 1 is very important because paragraph 2 references paragraph 1, what is written in there, okay? It's the terms that paragraph 2 follows, okay? So it states the appraisal value of the property must be equal to or higher than the purchase price or blank. Minimum appraisal value, purchase price if not specified, whichever is less, okay? So the key words there, and they highlighted equal to or higher than the purchase price. And then at the end there, comma, whichever is less. So let's say you sell a $300,000 house and you escalate the price all the way up to $375,000, okay? But your buyer says, you know what? I only need it to appraise for $300K. The appraisal gap I can cover, okay? So I've seen agents do creative things like writing on the last page of the contract, buyer willing to cover appraisal gap, you know, stuff like that. And if you remember, one of my biggest pet peeve is writing in that last special clauses or special section of the agreement of sale on page 14. So if the buyer is willing to cover that, then isn't it to say that they're willing to just have it appraised for $300K? So if the purchase price then is escalated to $375,000, but they're willing to cover that gap and it only needs to appraise for $300,000, then go ahead and put for minimum there in the blank $300,000, so that we know that all it has to do is appraise for $300,000, and anything above that is fine. However, if it goes below $300,000, then at least that allows our buyer to either back out or renegotiate with the seller. Okay. Any questions on that concept at all?
I do have something, Kong. So
go ahead, Tara.
I did this on a property in Greencastle,
okay.
But we did do a max, or we did a like property must appraise at, because buyers willing to spend X amount over appraised value. So it wasn't just, so there was a limit. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yep. Yeah. And again, it's whichever is less. So the purchase price is $375,000, and all it has to do, and you write in there or blank at $300K, then it only has to appraise for whichever is less.
So it's kind of the same concept, I get, just
yep.
different wording, I guess.
Yep.
Okay.
The next important thing is the contingency period. Now, it says 30 days, if not specified, from the execution date of the agreement, okay? Appraisers, I've noticed on several deals now, we can get appraisers out there within 1 week. And some of these deals, they're not out there until the very end of 3 to 4 weeks. So it's very important that you find out from the lender, how fast are they getting these appraisers out there that they've seen? Because one of my questions that I pointed out yesterday in my mass email when I sent out the notes was that this contingency, we're going to go through it here, these options, there really isn't an option for an extension. Okay, if the buyer doesn't get the appraisal in that 30 days, both options doesn't really allow for an extension. An extension can be given by the seller at their own graciousness, but they don't have to do it. Okay, and we're going to go through these options and you're going to see. But that's very important, because once the 30 days is up, or whatever days you have there is up, and there is no appraisal done, the buyer's buying the house. Okay. Within the contingency period, buyer must obtain an appraisal of the property from a Pennsylvania certified appraiser. Okay. Now, there's two options here. If the buyer is obtaining financing, the appraisal shall be done by a PA certified appraiser selected by the lender to whom buyer has made application for financing. Okay, so the buyer is getting financing, the lender picks. If buyer is obtaining financing, is not obtaining financing, sorry, the appraisal shall be performed by a Pennsylvania certified appraiser selected by buyer. Okay, we've always had that question. Well, who selects the appraiser if a cash buyer wants to do an appraisal? It's written right in this addendum. Who gets to pick? The buyer picks. Okay. Any questions on paragraph 1 before we go into these two options? Okay. So we have two options that the buyer has to initial off of. Okay. Number 2, paragraph 2. By initialing below, buyer elects one of the following options. Okay. Option 1, if the terms of paragraph 1, okay, referencing back to the paragraph we just went over, are satisfied, meaning everything's okay, or if the appraisal is not completed within the contingency period. So you have a satisfied appraisal, or the appraisal has not been completed, buyer accepts the property and agrees to the terms of the release paragraph of the agreement of sale. Okay, does that sound like there's a way for the buyer to get an extension there? No. 2, if the terms of paragraph 1 are not satisfied, so the appraisal value on a 300K house comes in at 250, okay? Buyer will deliver a copy of the appraisal report to the seller. So right there, it's written right there that the buyer has to give the seller a copy, okay? And buyer will, within the contingency period, A, terminate and get their deposit money back, or B, enter into a mutually acceptable written agreement with seller, meaning negotiate. Okay, all right, we wanted to pay $375, it only appraised for $250. We negotiate a price in between that both parties can agree upon in writing. Okay. 3, if buyer does not terminate the agreement of sale or enter into a mutually acceptable written agreement, negotiate, with seller within that contingency period, going back to paragraph 1, buyer waives this contingency. So if the buyer doesn't do anything in that 30 days, respond or negotiate or pretty much do anything, then they're accepting this agreement of sale as is, and they waive the appraisal contingency. Okay. Now, I think most of the times I've seen this addendum, option 1 is selected. And the biggest thing there is it does allow the buyer to terminate. Okay. Any questions on option 1 before we go to 2? Okay. Option 2, and I think where it gets confusing is the first 2 sentences, or at least the first sentence, it's a very long sentence, are the same. If the terms of paragraph 1 are satisfied, or if the appraisal is not completed within the contingency period, again, it's satisfactory, or it's not completed, buyer accepts the property and agrees to the terms of the release paragraph of the agreement of sale. Now, here's where this paragraph differs. Buyer further agrees to complete settlement at the purchase price. Okay, not at the appraised value, but at the purchase price by any of the following or combination. So you can pick A, B, or C down here, or a combination of A, B, or C. At buyer's sole discretion. So it's the buyer's decision, not the seller's. Okay. A, provide additional funds at settlement. B, adjust the loan amount stated in the mortgage or financing contingency paragraph of the agreement of sale. Or C, adjust the loan to value ratio in the agreement of sale. Okay. When we went over the agreement of sale, we had mentioned that if you fill out that mortgage contingency box, the mortgage information box, if you fill that out correctly, that is your built-in appraisal contingency, right? Specifically, the loan to value percentage and the loan amount that you're getting from the bank. If the house doesn't appraise, then those 2 numbers are thrown out of whack. Okay. If you need to watch video 2 again to get a better understanding of that, Brooks has the library, and we can send you the link again to watch. But the loan to value percentage and the loan amount, if you fill out that correctly, that is your built-in appraisal contingency. Okay. And again, right here, it shows that those 2 items are very important because B and C talks about the loan amount and C talks about the loan to value percentage. Okay. Number 2, buyer's election of any option above shall prevail over like terms of the mortgage or financing contingency paragraph of the agreement of sale. Okay. So if you select option 2 and you go A, B, or C, then this will prevail over what you wrote in the agreement of sale. All other terms remain unchanged. Any fees that result from a change in loan terms will be the sole responsibility of the buyer. So if they buy points, buy the rate down, stuff like that, that's on the buyer, not the seller. Okay. 3, if the terms of paragraph 1 of this addendum are not satisfied, okay, so again, it's going back to paragraph 1. So either you have a bad appraisal, okay, again, you bought the house for $375, it only appraised for $275. Or if the appraisal hasn't been done in that 30 days, then all terms of the mortgage or financing contingency paragraph of the agreement of sale shall prevail. Okay. Any questions? Any scenarios you want to ask? Now, one thing I didn't ask was, when do you use this appraisal contingency form?
I mean, I use it on almost every offer unless it's a cash offer and my buyer does not mind if it does not appraise.
Right. And that's okay. I know I keep saying that the appraisal contingency is built into the contract, But sometimes you don't know the other agent on the other side and how well they know the contract. So if they don't see an appraisal contingency, they automatically assume, oh, there is no appraisal contingency, even though there is one built in.
Well, we have started, Kyra and I in particular had a conversation about this a day or two ago. And because she had an FHA buyer, or maybe it was a VA buyer, she
Mhm.
did not include this form with the hopes that the agent wasn't on top of his game and just assumed that there was no appraisal contingency.
Right.
So we are starting to use that as a little bit of a tactic, hoping that they don't know their forms as well as we do.
Right. Even though it says it several times, right? In
Yeah.
the contract. And then you have that amendatory clause that some lenders send out too. So, but I wrote in here that you should use this form on cash deals or deals where you waive the mortgage contingency. Okay, because remember, you can waive the mortgage contingency, but in that fine print right afterwards, it says, although buyer may select to still get financing. Okay, so option one gives, the biggest difference I see here is that option one kind of, it gives the buyer a way out of the deal if the house doesn't appraise, right? Because A, right there under option 1, 2A, terminate the agreement of sale. Okay. Nowhere in option 2 does it say buyer can terminate and get their deposit money back. They're buying the house. Any questions? Better understanding?
A little bit, a little bit.
Okay. All right. Is there any forms that you would like for us to go over next week, or should I just start going down zip forms in order? There's a lot of forms. Okay. Mike, is there any forms you want me to go over next week? No?
Let
Sean?
me review them. Let me look over them and, see which ones, I'm not getting fully, and I'll get back to you.
Okay. Sean or Paula and Sue?
I really appreciate your doing this on this
Same.
addendum, because it's really, it can be very, very confusing.
I know.
This helped a lot, so thank you, Colin.
Yeah, I think in my mind now, I have in my head that I use this addendum, I'm not getting an extension, or if I receive it, the buyer's not getting an extension, okay? And 1 allows the buyer to terminate, and 2 doesn't allow them to terminate. I think if you just even know that concept,
Yeah.
you'll be fine.
I have a question, Con.
Yeah,
How many days do you suggest in there? Because 30 doesn't seem like in some cases would be enough time.
I know. And then if you put more than 30, the list agent's like, no,
Yeah.
and you won't get the offer accepted. So my suggestion is the client has to meet with the lender ASAP. Like, don't even wait the 7 days. Just the contract gets accepted, next day, meet with the lender, sit down with them, pull out the credit card and pay for that appraisal.
Mhm.
Yep. That way, here's the thing. If I'm on the list side and the buyer agent keeps me up to date, and they say, send me a text, hey Kong, I'm over at the lender's office right now, and they just paid for the appraisal, so we're set on our end. Then at least I know the buyer did everything they could to do that. so that if they ask for an extension later, I can say to my seller, you know, these people make good faith to do things, and the lender is just not getting the appraisal in, or the appraisal was done and the appraiser takes 11 days to get it finished, then we might be a little more sympathetic and give that buyer an extension. But if you're not in communications with the list agent on what your buyer is doing, and on day 29, you have no appraisal, and now all of a sudden you contact them out of the blue and ask for an extension, I probably won't give it to you. Right? So,
Hey, Kong, maybe a good form to go over, it would be kind of like a two-part form, would be the termination of the contract,
oh yeah.
and then how it relates to the money coming back.
Yeah,
That might be a
that's a
good
good one.
segue.
Yeah, that's a good one. Because remember, it only takes one party to terminate, but it takes two parties to
To get the
decide where
money
the
back.
money goes.
Yep.
Yep, that's a good one. Thanks, Stacy. All right, if there's no more questions, I'll end this call, but thank you for attending. And if you have any questions on this forum, please feel free to give me a call, or Brooks or Tim. We're here for you.